Okay, now we're going to get to our analogy, the analogy we always use, right? The car and mechanic shop. The car represents the people in the states, and the mechanic shop represents the federal government, okay? We're going to take this analogy one step further. We're not going to say the car owner, just the people in the states. We're going to define a single state. We're going to say the car owner represents Wyoming, all right? And we're going to introduce another character in this, and that's going to be this third person who is the car buyer, and we're going to say this car buyer is Colorado. All right, so we've introduced a new character, kind of defined our characters a little bit more here. So here's what's happening. Wyoming wants to sell their car, okay? Put a for sale sign, hey, anyone want to buy this car here? And Colorado comes along and says, sure, we want to buy it. We got a car seller and a car buyer. So what would a car buyer typically do? A car buyer is going to ask, hey, how well does that run? Okay, how well does your car run? And the car seller is going to say, well, it runs great. Thanks for asking, right? Car buyer then asks, how do you know? How do you know it runs well? And the car seller is going to say, well, you have my word on it. It's a good car. So the car buyer says, well, that's nice to have your word on it, but have you run any tests on it? And the car seller says, oh, sure, I run tests on it. I stick my ear next to the hood and listen. And if it sounds good, it's a good car. Okay? How would that make you feel as a car buyer? Maybe not so good. Well, is there something else we can do here? Is there something we can do to make sure it's a good car? Yeah, there is, isn't there? We can run it against a standardized test. Can we do that? You bet. Okay? So let's look at a hypothetical standardized test, all right? Okay, here it is. We're basically going to take this car to a mechanic shop and say, okay, run it. Run this test with these different standards, okay? And on the first little item here, he gets a 98%. On the next one, we get out of 152, score 124, etc., etc. Okay, so you go through this whole test and you find out grand total on this standardized test, out of 10, the score is 8.6. This car is an 8.6 on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay? That way, both the car buyer and the car seller know, look, this is what the test shows this car to be, what type of car this is, what quality of car this is. Now, what was important for this to happen is that the person who ran the standardized test had to be a third party. They had to be a disinterested party. What if the car seller ran the test? Well, they say, well, it's a 10 out of 10, right? The car buyer said, no, it's a 2 out of 10, right? You need to have a third party. That third party is the mechanic shop. The mechanic shop isn't trying to win or score points with anybody. They're just simply saying, here's we run it against a standardized test, okay? It's an 8.6 out of 10.